We'll go ahead and get started. We might have a few more people join us, but we want to be mindful of everybody's time. So with that, just a reminder, we've got the chat function open, so feel free to say good morning and talk amongst the participants or everybody in the room today via the chat. We've also got the Q&A open, so if you have any questions, go ahead and submit those via there, and then we'll go ahead and get those answered at the very end today. And then we have our part 2 today, so the Back to Business mini-series, and today's is titled Slow and Steady. So the Business Illumination Series webinars are sponsored by CJM Financial. So the last 2 months, CJM has been great to work with on helping us provide speakers and topics and provide the webinar series, and as we pivoted through all the changing times. So thank you to CJM for helping us provide this series and continue to provide it through May and potentially June as well. Trent couldn't be with us today, but I'm sure many of you have seen him on many of the other webinar series the last 2 months, but if you get a chance, just thank them for helping provide the series, and we always appreciate CJM Financial's partnership for all the chamber events. So with that, we would like to introduce Stephanie today. She is the Vice President of Human Resources at Kreg Tool Company, and she'll be sharing practices you can implement to understand your workforce and key considerations as you get back to business. And so to maximize our time, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Stephanie and let her get going.
All right, very good. Well, thank you for having me, and good morning to everyone. I'm excited to be able to share some information with you and some insights that we've learned as we've been navigating this process, which of course is unknown and a little bit of foreign territory for all of us. So the good news is we're all in the same boat with that. So I'm going to just work through some different things, and really hopeful that as you have questions that you think of, that you can submit those and we can have a little more interactive conversation after I work through sharing a few things. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to get us started here. Bear with me. There we go. Okay, so first just wanted to start off by thanking the Chamber and CJM Financial for hosting this event. I'm sure this is something that is on many people's minds, and hopefully again can be helpful to everybody as we continue to navigate through how do we return back to business as usual, whatever usual might look like for us going forward. And one of the things I think that we've recognized is one size does not fit all for the organization or the individuals. And so we've really just tried to seek to understand where are our employees at. And so I'm going to talk about some ways that we've done that. How can you understand your workforce, and then some key considerations that we looked at when we were determining our return to the office approach. Kicking us right off here with, I think, one of the greatest things that has happened, just like this webinar, honestly, is that in the last, 10 years or so of my career, just as many of you, really built a just fantastic network of professionals, and we've all been helping each other right now. So that's just been really helpful, and everybody is very open and willing to ask for advice, which I love that vulnerability that we don't have all the answers, and I think that's great. And we've seen a lot of that right now. They've been open to sharing best practices, what learnings they've had in their organizations, which helps then inform decisions that we need to make. And then also anticipating what's next. What's the next challenge we're going to face? How can we anticipate what's coming in the future so that we can stay ahead of the game and continue communicating with our organizations. The employees are really in the same boat. They have not experienced this before either. And so I think it's, interesting that we we just didn't know what to expect. And as even we have formed a task force, there's variety within our task force on how even our task force is feeling. So we decided to send out a simple survey, and it covered a few different things. The first thing was, what is our employees' ability to continue working from home? So whether that was internet connectivity issues, whether that was distractions at home. We all have kiddos or spouses potentially in the home as well. Or maybe somebody needed access to, for us, it's been product samples, different 3D printing or technologies, things like that. And so that was the first step, was what was their ability to continue working from home? That was really how we determined who was going to work from home, is were they able to? And then that was how we decided who would remain on campus for us during this time as well. The second thing we looked at and asked a question around is what barriers were present for each of our employees to return to work. So that might be childcare arrangements. It may have been, did they have someone else they needed to care for? Did they have their own underlying health condition that put them at higher risk? Just those kinds of things. Seeking to understand what are the things that make it difficult for them potentially to return to campus. And then the last thing was just what is their readiness? And this was fascinating. You know, we kind of did a small scale, 1 to 5. What is your comfort level? How are you feeling about returning? And so that was the other thing. And so with our return to work phased approach, we really had one primary objective, and that was to keep our campus safe for our essential employees who cannot work from home. And so for the most part, our workforce is doing really well and thriving at home. I think we've all, Jessica and I were talking about this before we kicked off here, that we've all learned a lot about working from home. In many cases, probably, we're more productive at home, or we've been able to really tackle some large projects. We've learned how to collaborate effectively via video. And so just trying to understand that. And we knew that it needed to be a slow approach, because we wanted to kind of test out different things for a couple of weeks, then maybe we could bring more folks back. And so our approach was, when we were going to start people returning, it was going to be, the first phase was up to 25% of those working from home could come back on campus. Now, we didn't end up getting up to that 25% level last week, but we did have a few individuals that did come back on campus. So it'll be a great opportunity for us to test out some of the things that we put into place and continue working through what's going to work for our workforce. The next thing I wanted to talk about was just the emotional health that has been a really big part of this for everybody, everybody around the globe, I would say. And I really feel like my superpower, I guess I'll call it, is empathy. And so that's really been important right now, as we know that everyone's in a different place. All of our employees are experiencing different stressors, whether they are on campus or working from home. They both bring their own set of challenges. And so really taking the time to recognize, where is your employee at? You know, if you're a leader and you're having a conversation with one of your employees, just recognize they might not show up exactly the same way they normally do. And having a little bit of extra patience and empathy, increasing your communication. You know, some of the things that we've done, we've actually said as an HR team, we feel closer than we've ever been. We're doing a daily stand-up via Microsoft Teams. And it's just been great to connect daily. It's supposed to be 15 minutes. Sometimes it goes for about an hour, but it's been wonderful. So just, you know, making sure that you're recognizing everyone's in a different place. And then, you know, the other thing I think with this is everybody's also consuming information from a lot of different places. And so to the degree that, we can help them understand where the sources of truth are that we're using as a business to make decisions, I think is really important to share that transparently. And, that's another thing that we've worked really hard on is communication. And so as we have not had everybody on campus, we've had to come up with new ways. We were very fortunate that our communications manager had been working on launching an app that we could use to communicate with all of our employees, which was especially critical for our production employees who don't have access to computers. So we had your traditional intranet site that we posted a lot of information to, and the app has been a great way for us to share video messages, which was new for us. Our CEO has been sharing a message on a weekly about basis. And in addition to that, we've had different members of the executive team share video messages as well, or some type of a blog post or something like that to continue getting the information out. Fortunately for Kreg Tool, we are in a situation where our demand has dramatically increased. And so we are looking for extra help. We're trying to keep our production employees who are on the front lines of that motivated and making sure that they're getting rest when they need it, and just trying to make sure we're doing a little bit of extra for them right now, because the pressure is certainly showing on them, in addition to some other things we're doing to increase our capacity. Moving on, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the key considerations that we worked through, and this is going to take a little bit of time to get through this, but I felt like there was a lot of good information to share here. So as we have gone through this process, it really has evolved over time. So when we considered PPE, or personal protective equipment, and temperature screenings in particular, we already have gloves for many of our work cells, and so people that need those in the plant wear them. We have safety glasses. Masks are something that we have offered on an optional basis. We have provided them for folks who want them, and I would say we've got a small percentage of people that are wearing them on a regular basis when they're on the campus. And the reason for that is, when we get back to that, what's the source of truth? There's a lot of contradicting advice from medical professionals out there, and some of the places that we all look to, like the CDC and the World Health Organization right now, really have differing opinions on that. So instead of forcing our employees to wear them on a mandatory basis, because we are not the subject matter experts on the effectiveness of that, we're leaving that choice up to the employees. In addition to that, we put barriers in our work cells. So, picture a production facility that has different cells where we're building product. Where there was not at least 6 feet of distance between employees, we did provide a barrier of sorts that was created to ensure that there was at least some type of protection for our employees. In addition to that, from a cleaning practices perspective, as many of you I'm sure are doing, we have our cleaning service doing more thorough cleaning more frequently, especially on the high touch surfaces in the work cells in the plant, which I'm talking about that mostly because they're the ones that have been on site the longest now. They are wiping down, spraying down and wiping down the surfaces that are being touched in their cells at the beginning and at the end of either their shift or if they're switching to a different cell. So that's been really good. There are wipes provided, sanitizing wipes, which we've been able to keep in stock in all of our conference rooms and I would say common use areas. And then we've also been able to, it got a little concerning at one point, but our EHS person's done a great job of sourcing hand sanitizer as well. And so we have that in, again, the high traffic areas so that is available as well. From an HR policies perspective, so as many of you have experienced, depending on the size of organization that you work for, we have had regulations that have changed. And so we've had to respond by either creating new policies or communicating what those new laws were, like the CARES Act, for example. We also had other policies that we really felt like we needed to look at. Immediately, we knew that we had to suspend our attendance policy. So that only applies to our production staff, but we wanted to ensure that they felt comfortable coming, missing work if they were ill, not just with coronavirus symptoms, but any other communicable disease symptoms, whether that was the flu, bronchitis, that kind of stuff that sometimes our folks are proud of their attendance and they don't want to miss work just because they don't feel well. And so, and they don't like to get attendance points. So we suspended that policy. We actually communicated yesterday, we are suspending that indefinitely at this point. I think we've seen the positive impact it's had from that perspective of, how does that free an employee from making a good choice about whether they report to work if they're not feeling well. In addition to just policies, I would say from an employee experience perspective, we've really tried to up our game on communicating with those folks who are out. So especially as we're learning and trying to build our awareness of what situations are out there. You have folks who've been exposed. Does someone have symptoms? And the students have done a great job of reaching out to their staff to just kind of touch base and make sure we understand their circumstances, which has allowed a core team that we developed to respond appropriately to those things. And then moving on to response plans. So we, like I said, have this dedicated core team. There's actually only two of us, myself and the EHS specialist, that as situations have presented themselves, whether it's exposure or otherwise, we have really partnered and documented workflows. How are we going to respond based on different scenarios so that we both are on the same page, and we've shared that with our broader COVID task force to just ensure that everybody knows what to expect. In fact, this afternoon, I'm going to be meeting with our production supervisors again, because things have evolved and we want to make sure they feel armed as well to respond as these situations present themselves. And that's the other thing I would really hone in on here with the response plans. So what we were doing 6 or 8 weeks ago, a great example is if somebody traveled outside of the state of Iowa, we really had kind of said nobody can do that. And if they do, they have to self-quarantine for 14 days. Recognizing that we are getting into a place where states are opening up, including our own. Restrictions are being lifted. It's summer. People want to travel. We have now evolved that practice and response to that type of scenario as an example that if someone has traveled out of state, that we'll just require them to wear a mask. So where it's not mandatory for everyone else, it would be mandatory for someone who leaves the state for 14 days. And in addition, depending on what kind of job they have and how much they're moving about the facility, we might also have some other restrictions handling that sort of case by case. But I think that's really important, is to continue monitoring the CDC guidelines, continue monitoring the Iowa Department of Public Health and the governor's communication around restrictions and the proclamations that she's been issuing, to make sure that we're evolving and not just sticking to what we started with, because that's not going to work long term. With that, what's been important for us, especially because we have this increased demand situation, is we are really trying hard to balance keeping everyone safe with knowing that we're going to be living with and coexisting with the coronavirus for some time yet. And we need to be able to try and have as many people on campus as we can safely to continue filling our demand orders. So it's a balancing act, and we're really trying to be mindful of all those things. Moving on to use of facility. Some of the things that we have issued as guidelines from our COVID task force for those, especially in the office, that are coming back on campus, that meeting sizes are limited. We are not allowing our office staff to utilize our main break room space, especially during high traffic times where our operations employees are on breaks and lunches. And so we've even created on the second floor of our main building, where the majority of our office staff are housed, we are working on creating a secondary kind of smaller break area to try to accommodate our office staff while not having too many people in the break room at one time, for example. So we just tried to work on different things that we could evolve from when they're on site. What is that going to look like, and how do our behaviors need to evolve? Now, like I said, we only ended up with, I think it was maybe 5 to 10 additional office staff that came on site here in this first phase. So we're going to, work with it. We're going to see what's working, what isn't working, and then as we learn and see how it's going. We also have not had a positive test with any of our employees yet, and so that may impact how we're feeling as well. And so we'll take a couple weeks with our current practices, apply our learnings, and then move to phase 2, which would be adding another 25% of our workforce to campus. And I would say up to another 25% because we didn't even get up there the first time. And then the last thing, I just thought it was really important to talk about gratitude and appreciation. Everybody, like I mentioned earlier with the empathy, is in a different place right now, and it's stressful. It's hard, just me as an example. My husband works from home always, and now he has 3 kids in the house with him. And I have been going to campus every day until this week. And we actually ended up renting a lake house up in northern Iowa to just change the scenery for our family, because that's what we needed. But there's stress that comes with me being on campus. There's stress that comes with my husband being at home. So our stresses are different. And for our production employees, it looks different for them. Some of them have kiddos that are at home that they're trying to check in with regularly throughout their shift. Some of them have different levels of fear. And so I just think that expressing gratitude and appreciation has been a really important part of the last couple months for us. Some of the things that we have done with our production staff being on site, we started offering the month of May. We've provided meals 1 day a week. It's actually 2 days a week to hit all of our crews because we're on a rotating schedule. But we've done that. Excuse me. We've also offered double time for any overtime that they were working. In addition to that, if they worked a 10-hour overtime shift, they earned 5 additional hours of PTO that they could use later. That's a hot commodity for our production staff. We just announced yesterday that we are increasing our entry-level positions pay in response to the increased demand and really needing to get additional temporary associates on site to help us fill orders. And our biggest competitor there is unemployment right now. People are making more in many cases on unemployment than they are with their regular wages. And then we've offered just some gifts. So our receptionist put together this very nice appreciation bag of goodies that she gave to all of our production staff. We're working on some kind of fun t-shirts with a playful saying on them that's related to COVID. We encouraged our leaders, especially the ones who are at home, to do something special for their teams. I did slippers for everybody on my team. I don't know why, but your feet get cold when you work from home. So that was kind of a fun thing to do. And then a few of us are working on some welcome back to the office gift bags. And I don't know if everybody knows this person, but I was introduced to this person, Nathan Wright, who wrote this really great Office Creatures book. It's very funny. Check it out if you haven't seen it, but we're going to include that for those welcome back to the office bags, just again, keeping it fun and playful and trying to keep everybody in good spirits. So that's a little bit about what we have done at Kreg Tool, and I would love to pause. We're about 30 minutes in, so wanted to pause. I'll unshare my screen so we can all, I guess, see me instead of my PowerPoint maybe, and see what questions have been coming in.
So we've had a couple come in via the chat, but feel free, everybody, to submit them chat or Q&A. So we'll go ahead and get started with the first one, and then we'll see what comes in the next couple minutes. So how have you handled employees who have expressed fears or concerns about coming into work?
Thank you, Brett, for that question, my fellow Kreg Tool employee. Yeah, so this goes back to the empathy, because I'm in my own place with COVID. You know, I have my own feelings about whether I am or am not scared. And so you really have to put those aside. And you have to just ask questions. We talk a lot about choice. And some of our employees who were scared early on, I have not had as many of these conversations recently, but early on, there were definitely fears for those who are on campus still. And we just had to talk about choices. You know, there are ways that people can feel more protected. There are choices they can make about wearing masks, who they interact with outside of work. That's probably been a big one, is we can't control everyone else. And so even though I'm being diligent, I'm not hanging out with my neighbors. I look at my neighbor and they're outside, you know, having drinks in the driveway, which we're all normally doing at this time of year. And so there, you know, a lot of judgment and definitely people being upset with that. It literally is just talking through it. It's taken a lot of stamina to have a lot of those conversations and not pass judgment and seek to understand where they're coming from and putting yourself in their shoes a little bit to try to help them navigate their fears. One other thing, Jessica, I might add on that too, is we did create a coronavirus resource page on our intranet site. And in that is links, of course, to all of the websites, CDC, Iowa Department of Public Health, all that. But in addition to that, we partner with EFR for our employee assistance program. And so we've shared out there a lot of great leadership articles, a lot of articles on mental health, best practices when you're working from home, like taking breaks, getting up and getting dressed every day and getting ready, just things that are going to help people be resilient during this time. And then we've communicated anything that we put on there, any message that goes out. We have communication boards in the plant for all of our plant employees to make sure they're not missing any of that information as well.
And you said that was on EFR?
Yeah. And there's a lot of other free resources right now out there. And so we've included those as well. As we've come across them, we've included those as resources for our team members.
Okay. Another question came in. What have been some of the unexpected positives as you've navigated this for Kreg Tool?
Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, so what actually, this is kind of exciting and fun. So we delayed we do an engagement survey. It's more of a pulse survey about every quarter actually. And we delayed that just because everybody was in the midst of other priorities, not because we didn't want to see the results, but just there were a lot of priorities and it wouldn't have gotten the attention that it deserves if we would have done it earlier. And so we just got our results back actually last week on that, and we had the highest engagement score ever. And multiple drivers, there's engagement drivers for ours that just were very telling that all of the effort that we are putting forth with regards to communication, resources, I think the gratitude and appreciation, all of that is, I think, having a positive impact right now on our employees. To be honest with you, we weren't sure what our engagement results were going to say. We were hopeful because we know we've been working our tails off to do the best that we could for our people right now. And I think, you know, we've all probably read this, that employees are going to remember, and candidates will likely ask, what did you do to respond to the coronavirus? And so I think I'm really proud of what we've done and what our leaders have done to show care and concern for their teams. And so super hopeful that, that will continue. And as we've talked and shared best practices with other organizations, I really do feel like we're doing the best that we could be for our employees. And so I think that's reflected in our engagement survey results as an example.
Fantastic. Well, we have time for one more question if anybody would like to submit one. Well, we'll give it a second. And we'll start kind of wrapping some things up. But thanks so much, Stephanie, for taking the time out of your day. And I think a little bit of a vacation too, since you're remote today. But thanks for taking the time out of your day to help us answer some workforce questions and help all the members get back to business as we start reopening things. And then thank you to CJM Financial for helping us host today. And then just so you guys have a little bit of upcoming, we've got lots of upcoming events. So we're going to continue with our virtual series through the end of May. So on May 20th, so tomorrow, we've got our Chamber Coffee on the Couch, which is a virtual networking at 10 a.m. May 21st is Reduce Your Risk of a Cyber Attack. So Team Logic is going to be joining us on all of the things surrounded with your questions on that. And that is also at 10 a.m. And then May 27th, we've got two things in one day because next week's a holiday week. So we've got our Chamber Coffee on the Couch on the 27th at 10. And then at noon, we've got COVID-19 What's Next, a webinar with two lawyers from Lamberti, Goki, and Lucci. So they're going to be kind of talking about business law related questions and things like that. So before we completely wrap it up, it looks like we got one more question that got submitted. So how are you working with your employees that are truly scared to even think about coming back to work at this point or at some point?
Yeah, so one of the things that I didn't mention is that before the government told us we had to offer 2 weeks of emergency sick leave to our employees, we had actually already offered that. And so the guidelines around what was eligible for that time off were different than they were for the governments. And so we just have offered as much flexibility as possible. Now, we are getting to a point where we have choices, conversations with folks that are still sharing the fears because things are evolving. And we do have to move forward. And so honestly, it's just really working through that, talking with them, helping them see what their choices are. And it really also depends on what ability they have to work from home, or if they don't and they're in the plant, then at some point we really have to work through that. But we've offered, a leave of absence in a case where someone was really navigating a serious level that was a little more ADA related from a mental health perspective. And so I think you have to exercise empathy and be as flexible as you can to show support. And then at some point though, I think you do have to set expectations for how we move forward.
Great. Well, thanks, Stephanie, for answering that last question. And thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate you joining us for a half an hour every day to get a little bit more education to get back to business. And with that, we'll just say thank you to Stephanie and thank you to CJM for helping us out today. And we'll let everybody get back to their busy days. So thanks so much, Stephanie.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Have a great day. Bye.